California and beyond. I'm Jude Tillman. From our studios in Mendocino County, we bring voices from all sectors of the cannabis industry and community, and we look closely at everything having to do with cannabis, including the current regulations and economics of this green rush we find ourselves in, but also the cultural traditions associated with cannabis, the spirituality and the healing history of this remarkable herb. Today's show comes on the heels of a county board of supervisors meeting attempting to address some of the problems that have emerged since releasing the county's cultivation ordinance for permit applications this past May 4th. In today's program, we'll look at the county's ordinance and measure its progress. But we also continue our deep look at the local cannabis community of small farmers, entrepreneurs, and all who benefit from our decades-old presence here in Mendocino County and in the broader Emerald Triangle. We're joined by three guests who each occupy rather different roles in this community and whose histories and current activities help illuminate both the past, present, and precarious future of our cannabis heritage. Brandon is a third-generation cultivator, carrying on the hands-on craft cannabis tradition of his family, decades-old work in the Emerald Triangle. Brandon lives in Mendocino County with his wife and 5-year-old daughter, who, if she chooses to continue in her dad's path, will become a fourth-generation cannabis cultivator. Brandon's family heritage began with his grandparents migrating from New York to Southern California to Humboldt County in the early 1960s, and then moving to Mendocino in the mid-1980s. Welcome, Brandon. Happy to have you here.
Thank you, Jude.
Chantal Simon Petrie is a founding partner of Streamline Solutions, a cannabis compliance consulting company based in Ukiah. She's a former cannabis program director with Village Ecosystems and was an inspector with the Mendocino County 9.31 program. Chantal received her law degree from Vermont Law School in 2003 with a focus on environmental and water law, after which she moved to Mendocino. She studied water resources management and development at the University of Colorado and earned an undergraduate degree in geology from Western State College of Colorado. Welcome, Chantal.
Thank you.
Ron Edwards is a cannabis horticulturalist and owns CKA Nursery in Willits, from which he serves as a consultant, helping people navigate the new regulatory environment. Ron's been in the cannabis industry for 20 years, first creating NCGA Seed Company in late 1993, to his current day development of natural day-length clones. In these recent years, in which the regulated and legal cannabis industry has grown, Ron's been a consistent presence at conferences, seminars, and public testimonial sessions at the county and the state level. In fact, every BOS meeting having to do with cannabis I've ever seen, Ron is always there. He's very knowledgeable. He's the go-to source for information on how your cannabis business might comply with county and state agencies. Welcome, Ron.
Thank you, Jude.
Thank you all for traveling out here to the coast to Cannabis News and Views. We really appreciate your presence. So, Mendocino County held a marathon all-day review of the cultivation ordinance that it finally opened up for cultivators' applications for permits. Permits, of course, that we all know are required for everyone in the state of California to have locally before they can apply for state licenses, now that we have regulatory regulations pretty much in effect. They're still messing around on the state level, and we'll talk about that in another show, but pretty much we've got regulations in place, and before you can begin to get a state license, you've got to have a local permit. So there's been a lot of pressure on the County of Mendocino, the Board of Supervisors specifically, to make sure that we have something that all of us 10,000 guesstimated 10,000 cultivators, never mind everybody else who's involved in the industry in some other aspect, whether it's laboratories or manufacturing or what nurseries, what have you. Nurseries are part of cultivation, though. So we've got a lot of people been waiting around for this permit to come out, these application processes to take place. So on May 4th, they finally issue it, and bingo wingo, no great smashing success. Around 600 as of now we're in approaching mid-August. Around 600 permit applications were submitted, and how many permits have we seen issued in this county? Let me see. Exactly 1 or 2, depending on whose count you're you're listening to. So meanwhile, we have Humboldt and Sonoma and all the other counties going whole hog, issuing permits and both cultivation and non-cultivation and other sectoral permits. I just heard of a farm in Woodland near Sacramento run by a former Mendocino resident, and he's growing 15 acres of clones. And my friend said it looks like a huge fruit orchard if you look at the aerial photographs. It's just amazing. 15 acres of clones, quite amazing. So some of our small farmers are kind of feeling negative at this point. They're a little bit convinced that our county elected officials and the staff alike are just simply trying to drive our cannabis farmers out of the hills or off their land and flush us all down the toilet. That's some of the more pessimistic views that are out there, for sure. Yet, when you look at the Board of Supervisors' review of staff reports and the public comment, that in my opinion, there are glimmers of hope. I've seen this movement on the part of the county officials over the last 3 years, and inching. Sometimes it feels like 2 steps forward and 1 step back. But let's take the chair of the Board of Supervisors, John McCowan, who seems to want to have it both ways in certain statements he's made recently. At the meeting that we're referring to, he said, I'm paraphrasing his quotes, John McCowan said, I've yet to be convinced that our county has realized a net value in having cannabis in Mendocino. Like, really? At the same time, he said during that meeting all kinds of good stuff, like our intent is to make these structures, referring to drying sheds, work for as many people in the zone that they're in, make them as many people as possible. He also said that the board supports revising the county codes to allow, for instance, portable toilets, as long as they're properly serviced. And he talked about setbacks. We need to be looser with our setbacks and not more restrictive. He also said that we should try to provide a reduced fee for a second permit application on the same parcel. And, people are listening to that and they're saying, wow, that sounds pretty good. And yet, show me the beef, show me the money, that's sort of. So let me ask you, just starting with you, Brandon, you have a unique perspective, a lot to lose. Your family's been on the land cultivating cannabis, but not only cannabis, you've got other things going on. Tell us for a few minutes, just tell us about your farm and what you stand to lose if these regs don't work out well.
Well, we have olives. We've had cattle there for the whole time we've been there. So, it's always been much more than just cannabis for us.
Mm-hmm.
It's a functional ranch and a homestead, and always has been.
Mm-hmm. So if you lose cannabis, no big deal, right?
Well, no, it's pretty hard to make a living just grazing cows and pressing olive oil these days.
So it's a question of making a living. Mm-hmm. But beyond that, you've been breeding in, what's the name of your? Blazing Oaks mm-hmm. Homestead. Nice. Blazing Oaks, you've been breeding really unique, high-craft cannabis.
Well, yeah, we've put a lot into this over the last, 15 years or so, especially in the last couple years, as it's, we've been able to be more open about it. And, it's very frustrating to have something that you've worked on for years or possibly even decades, and with a stroke of the pen, the county could potentially take that all away from us. And I don't think that's right.
Yeah. Ron, how do you see it in Mendocino County in terms of what we stand to lose compared with other counties around us? Do you think that things are moving forward, or are we more in the negative column?
I would say a little more in the negative column, because you would have thought that we would have had a head start and having a better understanding. And I think the best quote I heard was a retiring environmental director, Dave, I can't remember his last
Jensen.
name. Dave Jensen, as he stood up and said that we are making regulations on something we don't understand. And all that's going to lead to is bad regulations that people don't follow.
Oh, brilliant.
It was very clear yesterday, and particularly talking about the nursery business of, well, I just think you buy small plants. Well, Now, with it being a business, people are buying plants much later to replace them because you can't use pesticides, so you're going to have more losses. So the industry is changing, and they're not really as aware of it as I believe as they could be.
It's remarkable because many of the boards that advise the state in other areas, whether it's the timber industry or fishing or wine, those boards consist of people from those industries. Chantal, you're a bridge between the regulatory agencies and the farmers, and I don't know if you deal with other sectors besides cultivation, but how are you seeing that sort of knowledge gap that we're talking about?
I think it's vast. There's a vast knowledge gap between those that are making the regulations and those that are going to be regulated by it. Mm-hmm. And the forum for getting information from those that are doing the actual work, that are going to be regulated by it, to those that are making the regulations is inappropriate and kind of dysfunctional. Mm-hmm. I spoke about this yesterday. Mm-hmm. 3 minutes to speak or submitting letters, it's stifling, and it's not leading to a well thought out comprehensive program that's designed to bring everybody in successfully. It's been fear-based and reactive from the get-go. Like, we have to do this? Okay, if we have to do it, then let's fit people in these little particular ways.
Right. Right. So just to unpack what you just said, 3 things jump out at me. 3 minutes to give our input from the industry to the people who are making regulatory policy for our industry. That's a shortcoming. So, and then the notion that, well, let's take them one at a time. Yesterday, for the first time, I heard a number of people, both on staff, Carmel spoke to it, and the supervisors talk about an advisory board. Do you think this is a good idea? Do you think that they were just blowing smoke, or do you think it could happen? Ron, you're shaking your head.
It is huge. One of the things I suggested to the board, I didn't know the format, but I said even if they could just take topic at a time instead of mixing everything up and trying to remember where we were. But the advisory board's huge. Because you can get feedback. I mean, they're isolated. The board gets what comes through staff, they get complaints, but they don't get there's no direct people working on the issues, following up on the problems. You know, it may be a bump, but, there are 19 people rejected. Why was that? What can we change the ordinance? That wasn't discussed. So an advisory board would be able to dig into those, look at those statistics and see, why are we having such failures? Is there something in the program that we could do to fix that? And they're slow. One of the things they did was change that you go to building and planning first before taking somebody's non-refundable money, saying that they have hope, and then squashing them.
Just to clarify, as of May 4th, cultivators are supposed to go to the Department of Agriculture and submit an application to achieve a permit to cultivate. But now, yesterday, I think one of their systemic responses to the difficulties they've been having was to send them through planning and building to deal with a zoning appraisal and whether they're zoned correctly for what they're applying for, and the legal appraisal of whether they're legally able to do what they want to do, and then move it to ag. Yes, Chantal.
I thought when what I was hearing yesterday, it occurred to me that it hasn't been clearly laid out what are some threshold compliance issues that everybody should know that there's no discretion. That no agency has discretion, and they would be county-wide as well as state agency-wide. Because there's some things the county cannot offer discretion on a fish and wildlife regulation or regional water board or water rights. And we still don't have a, funnel is a word I think that Amanda Ryman used. Amanda from Flocan, I think that's her last name. We don't have a funnel that says, you have to make it past these initial steps in order to know if you should even go farther. Right now everybody's freaked out.
That would be great.
If they knew you can't get in, they could make a decision a long time ago. Go down to 6. Keep them in the manzanita. Whatever it is, change your expectations rather than run and run and run and run and pay and pay and pay and pay. Lots of extended amounts of time of stress to then find out you can't do that.
Yeah. And we have some people, a lot of people say to me, I'm just throwing in the towel, I'm not even going to try. Because it looks so daunting when you look at all of the regulations that the counties coming up with, it just like it'd be very easy to just throw the towel in and say, I can't possibly do this. I can't meet the obligations.
And to say things like, well, it's just like any other business. No, it is not like any other business, unless maybe opening a gas station or a refinery. Because the different steps and hoops you have to go through are way greater than a lot of other industries.
No, and it keeps changing too. I mean, the lack of consistency has been a major issue. You talk to two different people at 3 different departments, you get 6 different answers, and they're all contrary. So who do you believe? You might have ag telling you one thing, building and planning telling you another thing, the state water board telling you something else. And, it makes it very difficult to navigate and figure out what you're supposed to do.
Exactly. So what do you think that's a result of? Them not talking to each other, or them not even knowing the regs themselves to be able to both?
I think it's both. They often don't even know the regulations they're supposed to be enforcing, which makes it difficult. We've seen that quite a few times, especially with the water board.
There were a couple issues that came up, and I want to ask, getting back to what you were talking about, Chantal, if we had some just benchmark issues that you could check off and know, well, these are the bottom line things I've got to.
And there's no flexibility. Like, get clear on what's not going to flex.
Right. So what are some examples of those?
Honestly, I knew some clear ones for the last year and a half, at like helping clients through 9.31 into prepping for this program, but those shifted a lot recently. Even that there was a June 30th water rights filing deadline, it was hard and fast.
Right.
And now you can still file for those water rights. You don't know if it'll get you what you need to have for a CDFA application. Regional water board program being consumed into a state water board program.
CDFA is California Department of Food and Agriculture.
Yes. Threshold, you could definitely look at zoning. Those are the questions. When I start out with a client call, I pretty much ask, what's your acreage, what's your zoning, where are you located, what's your water source?
Those are the 3 things you start with.
And those give me an idea, they're going to run into problems with this and that, or maybe none.
Right.
And so zoning is definitely one.
Right. Some of the things that it seems to me they say they can't do anything about has to do with, for instance, moving from the coastal to inland.
Right.
And we've got a lot of poor cultivators here on the coast that are, what do we do? Because they're waiting for the Coastal Commission to make some kind of variance, I guess, allowance for coastal, and they say that they can't do a thing until the Coastal Commission does something.
It's another agency crossover. It's same as Fish and Wildlife. There's this state jurisdiction over county jurisdiction, and there's places where the county just can't enter. They can influence, but they can't necessarily write something that is going to depict the way that the Coastal Commission would go.
Right. So Supervisor Dan Jurdy, who's been pushing for some kind of regulations that allow permitting for coastal cultivators, he's been pushing for this, but then finally yesterday he said, well, we just have to wait and see. As he put it, I just hope the Coastal Commission will allow coastal growing without amending the coastal plan, because that would require a CEQA review. So it's the CEQA then that comes in, and that's out of...
Like the anchor.
Yeah.
Sorry, as the environmental person.
Yeah, that's been a change in his approach.
Right.
Has it?
Because months ago he was very looking for a path forward for people on the coast, working with exceptions, overlays, but I believe personally that it's a political response. Because there have been some well-organized neighborhoods on the coast that don't want that, and people have transferred, and so they are trying to remove that.
Transferred, what do you mean?
In other words, they use their indoor on the coast cultivation to move to an outdoor spot. And so they try to deny it based on, well, you were growing indoors, so we're going to do that. Also with the road issue.
Easement of private roads.
Going through,
Right.
that was another political point that had to, luckily the board saw it, is that if you are zoned for that and that's regular activity for that, you can't narrow it down. But I think that there have been some pressure. This community is not real organized. I mean, we looked better at the past meeting, particularly Covelo. People that showed up were just very impressive of not going over the same points over and over again. So learning how the system works. Your verbal presentation really doesn't carry the same weight as if you write a letter in. Because when you write a letter in, that becomes part of the permanent record that's attached to the agenda. Whereas unless you watch the YouTube, you don't know what was said by the public.
Right, but it's useful to first of all meet ahead of time, whether you're a Covelo group or a coastal group, and sort of figure out how you don't keep saying the same thing that each other's going to say. You got your 3 minutes, and if you do a letter as well as 3 minutes, it just seems like that would create an added punch, wouldn't it? Yeah. So, but let's make sure that as we reference in our conversation passing issues such as easement, that the people who are watching this know what we're talking about, because otherwise it can be just like, oh, I can't even stand it, it's too overwhelming. Right? Easement means allowing you to use a road that you live on, or through a road that you need to use to get to your cultivation site, but it's on private property. Is that correct? And you need to get permission to use it. Is that right?
It's generally written into the deed.
Right.
And it also are easements for like utility traffic,
Uh-huh.
Power line, water supply, road maintenance, emergency vehicles, fire trucks.
Right. So easements are allowed all the time for all of those things. I think that this might be an example when they had the hearing of a very organized group of private neighborhood associations that were there to protest the use of the private roads through their areas. But it's a case of a very small but vocal minority, because it ended up being not that many people when they looked at it. What was it, 5% of anybody who's in a private neighborhood that has, what do they call them, CMNAs?
CCNRs.
CCMA. What,
CCNRs.
CCNRs, thank you. And CCNRs are like homeowners association agreements, right? And those agreements, the county has no say over those,
They're
right?
civil.
So it's like CEQA. So we got all these things that the county has absolutely no control over. But if they become the big picture, when they're not, they're just a few examples, then easement shouldn't be an issue for cultivators. Is that correct? Are you on a private road, Brandon?
We are. We're part of a road association.
A road association.
And I think it should be kept civil. I think it would be a very bad idea to get the county government involved
in
something
that.
like that. I think it'd be a quagmire.
Well, you probably have a road association of neighbors who kind of support each other and like each other, and they're okay with what you do. Is that correct?
Yeah, for the most part. We're lucky we live in a neighborhood where we're in good terms with our neighbors, and for the most part, everyone gets along pretty well.
So this is the question of luck versus government regulation when you don't have that luck. So we had a testimony at the meeting from someone up near Laytonville who has a neighbor who's very against him. And what do you do in that case? If the right thing is for everyone to have democratic equal access to use of that road, what do you do if somebody just stomps their foot and says, this is a private road and we've got a road holders agreement? Where's the balance? How do we deal with that? Any ideas, Chantel?
I strongly suggest mediation. I'm an advocate for it. I think there's a lot of room overall to bring people to the table together with a person that's impartial, that they all feel comfortable with, who understands the issues, to allow some of the really big emotions around something to get heard, and then actually get down to, okay, this is the issues and we can actually solve these really easily. That's what I found in most conflict situations, that there's a time we just gotta like butt it out for an hour or two, and then you take a break and then you come back and you actually say, okay, these are the things that are important to us, and can you hear me or not? And road associations are ripe for that all over the North Coast, especially related to water quality impacts and related to funding in order to improve the ecosystem. Because right now it's all falling on individual APN holders, property owners that are enrolling in the different programs, and there's a space where there has to be a sharing of costs, and road associations have a lot more, a larger role that they can do in that, as well as a greater likelihood of receiving state funds to cover the costs that would otherwise be paid by individual cultivators. So there's a lot of room for that, and all over our county there's dysfunctional road associations and like really dysfunctional road associations. Like those that are there but that are like don't come on my yard, or haven't paid my fees in 20 years, or they don't pay, so we don't like them.
It can be, though, I can just see the wheels turning on people who are opposed to government intervention, because who's going to run that mediation service? It's
Right.
going to have to be the county.
Or
It's gonna have to
I was thinking it could be totally volunteer. There's a lot of attorneys that are trained mediators that are just like, you have to do pro bono stuff, and a lot of benefit could come from it. I was thinking of offering even to that group that came from the Woody Glen, Robinson Creek area, that they're all really well-respected people in the community.
Yeah.
It's like the pumpkin farm lady was one of them that was there. Like, I go and take my son to get pumpkins every year from her, and I was like, she's not against cannabis cultivation. She's against not having a say in what goes on farther down the road. It's not so particular about cannabis, but there's a lot of, just like you were saying in our intro, there's fear around it.
A lot
So
of fear.
how do we help people just be more at ease and to know that they are heard and there is a place for them to complain? Not necessarily the forum of always being the county or going to a regulated body, but it could just be in a community group.
Right.
It's lofty, you know.
Yeah, I was going to say it's a little idealistic. I was going to say,
Sure.
but it is lofty. But maybe, what do you all think? Do you think that could work in our neighborhoods? And
I think it definitely can. I've reached out to a lot of the people to understand what their objections are. And a lot of it is what they have been sold about cannabis. And I kind of fast forward a little bit to the future, is that it brings crime. Well, when it becomes legal, there's more of it around. It's less of a criminal draw. You're going to find that as it goes in, you're going to be dealing with more professional owners, because you're going to need to be able to watch your bottom line and be a business person as you go forward. So a lot of the fears the neighbor have are still looking at it as a black market item, and black market days of trimmigrants and who's going to be there. But when you've got to have people on payroll, pay 1099s, it's a different group that you're working with.
Entirely. All right. Well, this is very interesting. If you've just joined us, you're watching Cannabis News and Views. We're talking about the county regulations for cultivation, and actually, we're just denting the complexity of the county's regulations, new regulations, and they're going to be changing them again and again. I think at least 2 more times before we get them out on the streets, but for permit applications. But I think we're touching on some real critical difficulties. Easements on private roads, the question of inland versus coastal versus inland, being able to move your cultivation. These are larger questions, and who has authority? Who can actually intervene and step in and change this? Because a lot of the times you find the Board of Supervisors or their staff, they just throw their hands up and say, well, the general plan, or CEQA, or the state, or, I can't do anything about it. And it's sort of like, wait a second, let's look at it a little more creatively. What can we do about it? What can we actually tackle? So some of the other issues, let's just tackle them. Some of the other things that come up, the question of, say, track and trace. Let's take a look at that one, because this is what a hot number. I've been very disturbed by the fact that one of the poorest counties in California, which people are surprised to learn, the Mendocino County is a very poor county, but financially it's in deep doo-doo. And it's like ranked in one of the lowest. We lost timber, fishing. We're depending pretty much on cannabis, the elephant in the room, and they think it's all tourism, but it's really cannabis that keeps us alive, So we've got the situation in Mendocino County of not having much money, and yet they want to spend a bunch of money on an independent contractor to institute a track and trace system that would track every seed, every gram of marijuana, every retail sale from start to finish, which is a duplicative effort with the state.
It's flawed. Yeah, I have been traveling to Colorado since 2010 to see what was coming to California.
Yeah.
And watching the regular. In fact, part of the reason for being in the nursery business was track and trace, although California didn't require the cameras that Colorado has required. And so I learned about how track and trace worked, and when the county wanted to roll out with the track and trace system and sell the cultivator that it was only going to be $90 a month, I said, whoa, that's wrong. Because the track and trace is just part of a business program you need. You need software to run your business, and that runs between $250 to $500 a month, which interfaces with the track and trace. And the big flaw with the Mendocino SIPCUT program was that it was only in the county. Now, the county isn't net exporting county. It is not a consumption county. So it only tracked it to the county border. So if I sell clones to Organican, I say it went out of the county.
That's in Sonoma County.
Right. And so what is the purpose of that program? And they were talking about this 6 months before the state program. Also, the state nursery license is $560 a year, which includes track and trace fee. The county wanted to charge cultivators $90 a month, $1,080 a year. So it was a program that was going nowhere. It was a duplicate program, and I didn't see any need to implement it until the state came along. The other part is you can't get into the track and trace program until you have a permit.
That's a catch-22.
So we know where that's going to end up is
Right.
like last year, your last inspections were in December after you've already harvested, and then are you going to have to go back and retroactively do your track and trace? The intention was good,
Yeah.
that it was going to put a stamp on it and said this came from Mendocino. But as I told the CEO, I don't think we're having a problem with Colorado Indoor being sold as Mendocino Outdoor.
Yeah.
There's not a counterfeit problem like that. And so the reality is that when a cultivator takes a pound to a distributor or a dispensary, it then will follow that track trace number as it's broken down will be assigned to the seller's track and trace. So the Mendocino sticker will never be seen.
So his selling point, the person who represented the contractor that was going to offer the track and trace system to Mendocino County, gave a selling point that, well, we can track your appellations of
Right.
origin and designate Mendocino grown, and the state won't do that. So that's phony baloney, eh?
Absolutely.
Oh dear.
Surprising that there's not more consideration of the points that you bring, where it seemed,
Yep. In the meetings, there is a lot of hearing of the salesperson. Like they were given a lot of credibility,
Yeah.
and that was really surprising to me.
Yeah.
even though they did invite some,
A direct comment.
Yeah.
It was like, well, of course they're going to sell. They're going to say anything so that their contract is maintained.
They've already been
Right.
paid.
They can't even get out of the contract. Like the money's already been spent.
They've already
They
signed the
paid
contract.
$26,000
Oh
for
my
2
goodness.
years on this, and so I don't know. It was interesting. Some of the conversation after the Board of Supervisors meeting was that, well, maybe they'll make it a voluntary program
Oh, jeez.
for people who, because there are a group of people in the county who want that program.
Yeah.
They feel it helps them with investors. It promotes the appellations ahead of time. And so I think, we're stuck with it. Not the implementation of it, but we're stuck with the contract. And as the sheriff said the other day, nobody cares about mental health. Well, that $56,000 could have gone a long way to a lot of other.
it could have
And I've been
been a lot.
screaming my head off on this over and over, and they're still not, I don't know where it's at right now.
Well, we've touched on 4 out of 20 of the issues. We're going to be here all night. No. So track and trace is a fiasco. Do you think there's any chance of getting them to drop the contract, pay a kill fee, and get out of it? Or do you think we're stuck?
I think if we, as the cultivators, can find an attorney who would present a really nice letter on how to get out of this, because Humboldt, as a county, has dropped it. Certain cities are going with it. YOLO is the only other one, but it just doesn't. They got in quick and got it sold. That they were going to get the state contract, yet they don't run a state program anywhere else.
Right.
So whereas Metric has 4 states that they're running, which is Fernwell.
Right. Well, let's look at drill down a little bit on some of the particulars that cultivators have been especially concerned about. Who can most succinctly describe what overlay means, please?
Too late in thinking.
Oh,
Sorry.
all right, I think she's being sarcastic. No. And they want to put an extra set of rules that would preempt the existing zoning or designation of land purpose, land use. Is that correct? That would allow an alteration. It's a way of ducking some of the problems, some of the constraints that the various supervisors have noted over the last couple of years. Oh, my hands are tied because of CEQA, or because of Coastal Commission, or because of this, that, and the other thing. But we can we can escape those constraints by having an overlay. So one of the things I know the very organized Covelo group of cultivators kept saying, we need an overlay, we need an overlay. What is that responding to? Do you know, Brandon, what in terms from a cultivator's point of view, what's the issue?
Not exactly. We haven't had to deal with that on our farm yet. So
you
I
don't have
haven't-
that problem.
I haven't been following it as closely.
Yeah.
They might know a little bit.
Yeah,
It's- yeah, go
it's
ahead.
acreage. I think they're
Yeah, it's acreage
Their
when you
parcel
don't.
sizes are 2 and under. There are R2s. So all of them, many of them in the downtown Covelo Valley floor are too small in size. They're all going to be sunsetted.
To meet the
many
setbacks.
of them.
yeah.
Sunsetted
so-
meaning
so-
they have to shut down cultivation within a certain 3 years.
Yeah, they have this season, next season, and the 2019 season, and then
that's
end to
it.
end. Yeah, and
Like Ron was saying, on 2 acres, if you meet the setbacks, well, there's 2 acres, so they don't meet some of the basic zoning regulations that are written into the ordinance. But 2 acres is very small to meet all the setbacks. To do a cultivation of size, in some cases, depending upon the orientation
Yeah.
of
of your lot, there's no way that you can't fit a garden anywhere and still have the setback from your property boundary.
So, folks, that then goes in tandem with the request of expanding cottage industry licensing and permitting, so that you can have, say, a smaller, and then remove the sunset. You could have a smaller cultivation and get rid of the sunset clause, so you can continue to operate as you have been. Is that where we're going?
Yeah, it's a double-sided issue because, yes, the overlays are that, but because they haven't worked on the cottage, they have encouraged everybody to go the full 10,000 square feet because of the cost. I mean, you may lose it, so you are encouraged to go bigger than you might have otherwise wanted to do because of the ordinance, the way that it's written.
Right.
One
You can't-
application fee, regardless of permit that you're going for. Period.
Now, one of the things they talked about at the board meeting was to allow 2 application fees or 2 permits per parcel. It sounds like they might be going in that direction. Would that help mitigate against that problem? Or?
No.
That's written into the
Ordinance
ordinance
already. That's been there
Is
from
in
the
the beginning as well.
Okay.
2 applicants per parcel, 2 applicants per parcel, but you can't go over the maximum square footage of the largest of whatever permit you go for.
Say that again.
2 applicants, 2 permits per parcel, 2 permits per person. So you can have one person have permits on 2 different properties, or you can have one person have 2 permits on 1 property. And if you go for one of them being a large outdoor, a 10K, whatever other permit you bring into that has to stay under that 10,000 square feet is the maximum square footage.
Which is why we have an abundance of nurseries,
It's
because
nursery
it was the workaround. Because
Yeah.
with a nursery, it's 22,000 square feet, so you can take 12,000 square feet of that and say it's a nursery, and cultivate on 10,000 square feet, so you can populate your greenhouse or your light depth.
Yep.
So this is a workaround that the cultivators came up
Yeah.
with. Very clever. So we're going to make this system work in spite of them, huh? Sort of. All right, well, that's okay. That's interesting because the counties around us don't seem to have these problems. I mean, I just ran into someone in Santa Rosa who just moved down from Arcata in Humboldt County to Sonoma County and bought 600 acres to cultivate on. What's up?
I mean, they're not going
Dollars.
to grow 600 acres of cannabis, though, but even if
No.
they have that large of a parcel.
But they obviously can go much bigger than we are.
Yeah.
Yeah, at the
And what do
state
you
level,
think-
we're considered small. We're the
Right.
smallest here at the state level. That's
Right.
what they're
We're
allowing
cottage.
here.
10,000 square feet is cottage at the state level,
From the
or
get-go.
micro business.
Right. And Mendocino County considers that a large,
Yeah, huge.
huge grow.
In some of the board meetings, I've heard some
Hints of in the future they're going to expand from the 10,000 square feet to something larger.
With
Do
large,
either of you heard some of
yeah,
that? That
with
it's
large
like-
limitations on ag land, and you have to prove that your water is detached from the aquifer. It's going to,
Right.
which is an impossible.
Yeah.
Yes, actually,
Yeah.
Very close to.
County Council, who's in charge of cannabis, Matt Kudrowski, suggested that the expansion of the site size to a larger site in the future is likely going to be countenanced. That'll be allowed. So I don't know how
Right.
much larger or when or anything, any details. But I mean, they kept making noises in the meeting about, well, we're going to loosen up on the setbacks, for example. The setbacks are currently, what is it, 600, no, that's the state.
1,000 feet.
1,000
square
feet
feet.
from property line to property
garden.
line
To the garden
to the garden.
or the wall of.
Right. So
Receptor, isn't that
Yes.
the language they use? Which is really odd. Yeah. I think it
right,
was the
Supervisor
lawyer person.
McCowan was talking about being looser with that setback.
Because
Yeah.
the state has said that you can read this. It's the one area of the bill where the county can be more lenient than the state.
In law, generally, the county, a smaller jurisdiction, can't ever be more lenient. Just in
They can
in
be more
general on
conservative.
anything. They
Right.
can always be more conservative.
Like,
And
to the
this was
point
a
of
big
banning.
prank. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
They could totally ban it, right? And that's
Right.
what I think. Sometimes that has come up. Well, we could totally ban it.
Oh, the threat.
It's almost like children at the playground. Like, you might not be able to go down the slide if you don't climb the stairs that way.
Right, exactly. So how does this affect your farm? Would you like to expand? Would you like to have a larger cultivation area?
Not at this point,
Uh-huh.
but the county has placed so many restrictions and so many hurdles on it, it's become uncertain if we can even get up to 10,000 square feet. Just because it's become so incredibly expensive even just to comply with what we're already farming.
Are your grandparents still alive?
No, they're not.
Your parents are.
Yeah, they're still
What do
live
they
here.
think of all this? They came up through the black market
They don't have a very
era.
good opinion of the county government at this point, to put it nicely. Yeah, I mean, my dad is just shocked by it. I mean, that he's run his business off the farm for decades, and we've, as I mentioned before, we've been a functional ranch for decades, and all of a sudden, all these special restrictions are getting slapped on us for everything, just because we want to be in the cannabis program.
Sure.
So it affects all aspects of the farm and all aspects of our livelihood there.
Does that mean it's coming down on your shoulders to deal with the county? And because the rest of the family's like, I don't want to do
Well,
that.
no, my dad's usually always there too. He was there on the meeting Tuesday as well.
Oh, that's
so
good.
we've been working as a family to try and navigate it.
If you can't make it in the cannabis world, as in the producer county, if you somehow just can't get through all those hurdles and pay all those fees, what will happen to this rich stock that you've developed over these?
Well, I don't know. I don't have a
Years
good
and
answer
years.
for that.
Yeah.
We'd have to figure out something else to do, I guess.
When you have elected officials in the city, the county, and frankly in the work that I've done in Sacramento on the state level as well, who are so ignorant about the most basic aspects of this industry, it's hard for them to even begin to understand the loss of culture and traditions and intellectual property and everything that we've developed in 4 decades here in the Emerald Triangle, what that loss means. And we have a global reputation. We have a value that is beyond monetary. And I can't even begin to have the conversation with most of our public officials who are so clueless. It's how do we overcome this attitude?
Education, I guess, and persistence.
Do you have an opportunity, Brandon, to talk to people who are outside the cannabis industry about what value cannabis brings to the community?
Sometimes. I mean, we'll certainly try to. But again, that's been relatively recent. We always had to be so secretive about it in the past.
Sure.
So I've been really shocked how many people that live in this county and even have lived here for such a long time that were so oblivious, I guess, to what goes on here just because they weren't part of the cannabis industry or weren't associated with it.
Right.
So that's something that's been sort of shocking to me, that you do get these comments that, it doesn't contribute anything. And it's not the economic driver. And you're just like, wait, what?
Right.
It's just so, delusional almost.
Yeah, delusional, that's a good word. Yeah. Some people, we've been having this conversation now for months within the cannabis industry and community here in Mendocino, and not just cultivators, but people like myself who have dispensaries and are involved in medicinal cannabis education, and I'm very concerned about that we have good laboratories here. I'm very concerned that we have good manufacturing, that all the people who have been making wonderful medicines in their little backyard kitchens and creating the medicines that nobody else has got in the rest. They certainly don't have them in Nevada or in Florida or any of the other 29 states that have medicinal cannabis. And I'm so worried we're going to lose that. It's such a valuable, the tinctures, the infused products that are so helping people with cancer and epilepsy and Parkinson's and Alzheimer's and all of those things. I just don't think that the world, our world, has any sense of what's at stake here. Right now, when I talk to people, I see them seeing 4 possible routes: throw in the towel and move away or give up entirely. Try to find some big, fat, deep-pocketed investor to help them come up to scale and be able to compete on the California marketplace. And those are few and far between. And someone pointed out to me, well, the investors aren't going to be investing in us. We're not the people they're looking to invest in. Join in a co-op and try to make that sort of counterweight to the corporate move-in to our industry. And that's a rough road as well. Or stay in the black market, which is a dead end. But yeah.
The black market is not a good thing to bet on, because it's no longer you're going to do time in jail, it's your money that's going to be, because they are bringing the full force of administrative fines from the water board, from CDFW, building and planning. I mean, if you notice, when somebody is arrested, there's 5 different investigations going on each agency. Yeah, each one wants a bite out of you.
Oh,
It's happening already. Yesterday, I was at one during the day.
Yeah.
I was struck for a moment just hearing you talk about the loss of culture, and that's so. That's what motivates me to be involved in helping as many people from the local community that I've known for the years I've lived in Mendo, help them stay in. That's what I call it. Help them stay in and thrive. Help them still be able to pay for their children to go to school, to have the lifestyle that they have. But on the converse is, not only is there this massive potential loss of culture, there's also there's a culture coming in. If the local culture that's been here is not protected by allowing an economic industry to continue, by giving an avenue for that small cottage type of grow, and it doesn't need to be 25 plants. That's the number that's being given. It's just more of a simple, on the land, full production, genetics, all the way through to many family members being involved, and it being something that has a lot of heart in it. If those people step out because there's not an avenue for them, what's coming in its place? It's not going to be filled. And it's not going to be filled with the same type of generations of people connected to the land here that have connections in different businesses as well outside of the cannabis industry. There's a fabric of community that's here, and there's something else coming in that I think, for example, the Woody Glen neighborhood is an example from the recent meeting.
Where is that?
That's outside of Robinson Creek, where they have this issue with a cultivator moving into their community.
Where is Robinson Creek?
South of Ukiah, on the way from Ukiah over to Boonville. Just any neighborhood could be that. One person buys a parcel and in comes a cultivator, and the other community members that have owned property there forever have not been cultivators. It's kind of the opposite of some of the neighborhoods in other parts of the county. But in that case, those people don't want that cultivator there. But I would suspect and predict that there's going to be a time when they wish they had found a way to work with that cultivator. Because what that cultivator was still going to bring to their community is better than it being a complete absentee corporate owner that just has a farmer planted there that has no connection to the local community, that shops at whatever large box store whose money doesn't go into our local economy, that doesn't value local culture. There's something that's unraveling that I haven't heard spoken about in the comments. I hear it like we need to keep the 25 plant grow, but there's an even more of a heart argument that the forum, again, like I said earlier, the Board of Soups meeting is just too sterile. It's not really a place for the discussion to happen. This is a great forum. Thanks for doing it.
Yeah.
So,
And on that, there's 2 things. When you say McAllen doesn't see that it's been a positive, well, some of the negative effects have been an inflated salary because people were paid because you could go to jail. So the minimum wage expectation and what you get paid for a job has been destroyed in this county.
Explain this to me.
Well, where people think that minimum wage is $20 an hour for doing a $12.50 to $15 an hour job in regular agriculture. And so that kind of has, and when we were building our house, it was October and it started to rain. Well, we didn't have contractors show up because they were taking care of their crop instead of coming to do their cover job. So those are, I think he's not talking economics, he's talking some of the other little underlying things that have affected the county. And
that's economics, that's driving wages.
And when I'm talking to people who are against it, I go, well, no, it's not going to corrupt the youth, because at some point you're going to need to have a degree from Davis because the amount of dollars involved in it are just going to force it to go that way.
Right. Well, I mean, the good side of it is professionalizing the industry isn't all bad. I mean, to have good laboratories, to have people trained in horticulture and plant pathology, that's not a bad thing. This is, we can make, yeah, so how do we keep all of the good, that those traditions, how do we keep the heart, but meld it with the business and the professionalism that we need to bring the producer counties up to the, I guess, the competitive edge they need to have in the rest with the rest of the state. How do we do that without compromising who we are and what we've been for so many decades? This is a fascinating conversation. We're starting to get off of the dry, sterile stuff of ordinance language. And if you would like to join the conversation, or if you have questions for any of our panelists, you're watching Cannabis News and Views, and you can call us at area code 707-964-0101. And by all means, give us a call and state your opinion about what we're talking about, or ask questions, or what have you. You know, when we talk about these four options, I mean, maybe you all see other options. You're a businessman, Ron. I mean, how do you see, but rather a melding of those two things that we talked about?
It was a shock, having a catering business for 23 years and building it and having it grow, and at a couple of conferences meeting some people, and the reality was set in for my future. Because of the always having to expand to be bigger, I have to prepare my business for sale. Because it's not going to be possible with my property, with the limitations, to continue to expand to compete in the market. Because a lot of the larger nursery operations are dropping the price. So I'm preparing my business for sale in 4 to 5 years.
Whoa. How does that make you feel?
I'm too young to you know, retire completely. And so, yeah, I'm wondering what I'm going to be doing in the future.
So you've been spending a huge amount of time and energy to try to help shape the cannabis regulatory atmosphere and environment, and in fact contribute to your community in a real meaningful way for a while now. And now you're talking about you'll have to drop it.
And doing it because you can either pay a lawyer to do it and get questionable answers, and I know several people who have hired lawyers and they're still calling me to get answers on things. Or you take the time to show up, because you have to work in your business as well as on your business. Those two things need to happen, and I feel that I'm at the meetings and I'm protecting my rights at the same time for other people too, as I see things going.
Yeah, I share that philosophy. I'm trying to run a couple businesses and be on it as well. You know, sort of. Yeah, this is hard.
It's hard, it is.
All of us nod our heads.
Yes, we all are nodding our heads, right? And, you know, yeah, I met you, Brandon, at a 420 Farmers Market, which is just a wonderful expression of community spirit and support for each other. There was no competitive, try to get the people who come to the market to come to my booth and not that booth. There was none of that. It was just remarkably warm-hearted, and the spirit of it was just great. And everybody I went around and talked to, they all said, you know, we don't make any money here today, but it's that coming together and supporting each other and just having a presence and showing the rest of the world what we really look like. We are not the Mexican mafia.
No, and I think that that's really key in talking with lots of farmers. The farmers markets would be key to Mendocino, because that would be a draw for people to come up on the weekend to go shop and meet the farmers and you know, have that interaction, because I participated in a number of them, and they're great events. Really, for the small farmer.
They really are. So what's the status right now? Are we going to be able to have open markets here in Mendocino?
Yeah, the state has put in a framework for that to happen, to where you will have a sponsoring dispensary that sponsors the events, and I can see it kind of like they do over in Oakland, to where the money would flow through the dispensary, that for the taxes all tracked and so forth. And I think it'll be a really important issue that has not really been addressed, but unlike Humboldt County, where they shut it down, Mendocino has not done that.
Oh, that's good. So the county is following the state's lead on that.
Would seem to be.
Yeah.
They seem to be. Oh, fingers crossed.
We haven't gotten to that permit yet.
Yeah, but they haven't shut it down, which
Right.
is good to see.
Yeah.
And like you said, it is building. We've actually been surprised to see repeat customers at our booth that have come from several counties away. And even last time there was a lot of tourists from all over the world that stop by our booth. We talked to people from Norway, Australia, all over Europe. So that was really fascinating. I thought that's the first time I've seen that.
Right. Well, I know I've had friends who go to Amsterdam and they mention Mendocino, and people are like, yeah, we know Mendocino. Mendocino has a worldwide reputation.
Yes.
Somebody please tell our Board of Supervisors that. I think we have. But
So if you travel with California plates, the Highway Patrol in the middle of the country are very aware of Mendocino.
the Highway Patrol especially, yeah, exactly. So we've talked about track and trace. We've talked about expediting a move to, well, just a structural move to. So our cultivators are going to be going possibly to planning and building before going to the Department of Agriculture. Maybe this will streamline. Maybe we'll start to get some more permits issued. Do you think that there's any chance, Chantel, that they're going to put together a list? I think somebody else testified about this as well.
Amanda. Yeah, Amanda from Flocona.
Amanda did, yeah.
She's got a great brain. I'm glad she's in our area.
Yeah, I'm glad she's too.
Who knows what the county will actually come through and do. So far, they know one of the individual agencies seems to be totally confident in knowing what that list is, and so none of them are stepping forward. It would require a lot of communication between agencies that basically seem to be very separate, except for their heads crossing over in weekly head meeting, like all the interims. That's what I call them. We have the interim this and interim that.
I
and interim
noticed
this.
that.
Yeah.
Right. Everyone who stood up to speak from a county agency was interim.
It's
What is
similar
that
in
about?
Santa Cruz. Santa Cruz, the same thing. All of the chiefs, many of them have stepped away from the position when the legal cultivation ordinance started coming their way.
Yeah.
They created an advisory council and a cannabis unit, which then got shut down, and now they're going through the CEQA process there.
Oh,
Monterey's
wow.
in a similar case too.
Oh dear.
And so every county's different.
And we
but-
lost our new ag guy that they brought in.
Right, the man from India.
Arif,
Arif.
he's gone, and there's, we don't have a head at building and planning.
Right.
Ag is very on it, I feel.
Yeah.
They are.
But building and planning is so explain to me, building and planning is regulation, where ag is interpretation.
I love it. Sounds Mendo.
Yeah, ag has been good. They're probably the only department that's actually been pleasant to deal with.
Well, from my point of view, which is a non-cultivation ordinance point of view, I've been really pleased with P&B, with Mary Lynn Hunt, who's
P&B
been very
Planning.
receptive.
Yeah.
She, and I told the story before on this program, and I'll tell it again because I think it's a shining example to other local officials. When I went up to her and said, listen, if you need any guidance or help or conversation about what are the aspects of the non-cultivation laboratories, manufacturing, all of that, and dispensaries, what you need to know about how we work, just let me know. She says, so a few weeks later, she calls me up and says, yeah, me and some few staff, we'd like to sit down and hear what you have to say. So I pulled together some consultants from Sonoma County that help people set up their manufacturing facilities and their processing facilities. I pulled together some manufacturers from Mendocino County. We went down to planning and building in Ukiah, and Mary Lynn met us at the gate, took us back to a room that was not her and a few staff. It was a huge room of 15 people from environmental health, from the agency that goes and checks about volatile and non-volatile, explosive stuff, and all different groups were all there, gathered in that room to just listen to us and ask questions for 90 minutes.
That's great.
Not 3 minutes
That's
at
like
a podium.
advisory council.
Yeah.
This is
session.
democracy.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yes.
Now, I think if we push them, they're feeling a little bit flustered right now. This is my gut feeling. They're feeling a little frustrated. I think they get that they are beginning to know that they don't know.
Well, I had ag out to my nursery last year to go over and find out what a nursery does. What's a cannabis nursery like?
Oh, fantastic.
Two staff members came out, and some of the departments are reaching out, and it's good for them to try to see the differences between cannabis and other things. But I think ag has a really good grasp over it. They don't have the stigma of it's illegal. They're like, it's a crop, let's go.
Yeah.
They just flip the switch very easily. Where, I think the sheriff department, the district attorney's office, all are having a much more difficult time with it and running interference in little ways.
Yes. Yes. We're coming to a point where I want to make sure I get some announcements in before the end of the hour. For instance, very important workshops are coming up that we want to make our viewers aware of that are going to help people who are trying to figure out the permit process and the state licensing process. The Mendocino County Growers Alliance, which is part of the California Growers Association, is having a policy workshop on Saturday, August 26th from 1 to 4 p.m. These are workshops for each cannabis business license type that will help you figure out how to apply and what you need to do to obtain a permit and then a license. This will be taking place at Fry Ranch, 14000 Tom Key Road, Redwood Valley. For information, go to the Facebook page, Cal Growers Mendocino. Also, for more things about all things cannabis, especially Mendocino County, tune into the Cannabis Hour on KZYX with host Jane Futcher, 9 a.m. Tomorrow morning. She's going to be talking to Virgil Grant, who was sentenced to 6 years in federal prison back in 2010 for owning and operating 6 dispensaries in the LA area. And they're going to specifically be talking about the fact that people of color are much more likely to receive stiffer penalties for cannabis-related charges than white folks and how that might change. Certainly not under Jeff Sessions, but maybe in California. Virgil Grant is the president of the Southern California Coalition and the co-founder of the California Minority Alliance. Talk about needing to break through a glass ceiling in the industry. People of color and women both share that particular struggle. Third, the Mendocino Cannabis Resource Center is offering a workshop on Wednesday, August 16th, Standard Operating Procedures, the recipe book for your cannabis, presented by Cara Cardoni, who is with the Ashara Consulting, and Thomas K. Edrington is also going to be presenting with the Humboldt Nomad Consulting. All these consulting companies that are cropping up. You all are a bunch of consultants too, aren't you? And it's like, this is the new growth industry, isn't it? We all need you. So they're going to be offering compliance and employee training and investment searches that require SOPs, and you're going to learn what SOPs are, Standard Operating Procedures. So that cost is $35 at 399 South Main Street in Willits, and you can register at mendocinoCannabisResource.com. That's all for this hour on Cannabis News and Views. If you want to watch archived programs, go to MendocinoTV.com. If you'd like to provide feedback, criticism, ideas for the show, you can contact me by email through news-views@dragonflywellness.org. Thanks for joining us on Cannabis News and Views. We're going to continue for a little bit of this conversation because we can.
There's a lot to talk about.
Yeah, there's a lot to talk about. You know, one of the things that's felt a little awkward to me, I used to grow and sell cannabis throughout California, but then I stopped and I started with a group of holistic healers, a wellness center, because, you know, your cannabis has to go someplace, and let's have it go for patients, huh? So that's been my passion, is helping to channel the best medicine, which is what the craft cannabis of Mendocino and the Emerald Triangle has been able to produce, the best medicine in the world, to the patients that need it throughout California, and I hope eventually throughout the world. One thing that's been very hard has been bridging the gap between cultivators and farmers and everybody else in the industry, so manufacturers of medicine makers, and the dispensaries. And I think there's a sense sometimes that we aren't of the same family. You know, when you think about dispensaries, you think about these places with guards with guns at the doors and bars on the windows down in LA and these malls, and it's really a frightening kind of thing. And you think and everybody up here's been, in terms of laboratories, having to go south. We haven't had any laboratories in Mendocino. So it's sort of how do you see, perhaps with the idea of co-ops, perhaps with things like what Flocana is offering, or perhaps through the farmers markets, how do you see us starting to work closer together? This is a sky out question.
I don't think there's one single answer. I mean, I think it's going to be a multitude of solutions, probably everything you suggested.
So do you make medicine on your farm?
Yeah.
What kinds of medicines do you make?
Well, we grow flowers.
Well, aside from flowers are great medicine, but they're also raw material for our infused products. So
At this point, we don't make them on the farm. We'll usually contract out with somebody else for that. So.
And are you helping anybody that's outside of the cultivation world figure out the regulatory framework at this point in time?
No.
Not at all.
No, I'm kind of like so maxed in the world of
That's-
what can I grow,
Cultivators.
where, and when, and how.
Yeah, yeah.
I would like to understand it, and I have knowledge of it,
Uh-huh.
but it's not something that I consult in now. Also because it's not on the verge of being opened up as a type of permit you could apply for in Mendocino County.
Well, in a month, we're going to have something
It's-
coming from P&B. In
Yeah.
the first week of September, in fact, it'll be
Right.
presented before the
Yeah.
Planning
Or
Commission.
something, yeah.
And I hope that for all these cultivation meetings I've gone to at the Board of Supervisors, I hope people are going to be coming to our meetings about...
Yeah, I'll be there.
yeah, great, Ron. So how
One of the interesting things that,
Yeah.
that is coming that's going to be a problem, there are already people looking for very limited space in the zonings they're talking about.
That's what I was going to ask about zoning.
They
yeah.
are kind of saying two things, is that on the one hand, we have a flat tax rate, which is cheaper than any surrounding county. But on the other hand, we have fewer zoned areas where they're looking at.
So 6% of all of Mendocino County is considered industrial, where you could actually have certain
Yeah.
kinds of manufacturing.
And it's going to be hard to find those properties.
Do you remember early on too, they tried to limit that you couldn't subdivide them, and permitted
Right.
parcels that were subdivided after January 1st, 2016 were not going to be allowed to receive permits for, and that was something that a few people tipped me to advocate for that. And I didn't see at the time why. Sometimes I advocate for things that I don't quite understand, but I trust that the people that are requesting it know farther down, like both of you that have a perspective on things that I don't have.
Sure.
And it was taken up and well received, which is a good thing.
Yeah.
And part of the problem is going to be, particularly with manufacturers of edibles, because the state rules are only so many people can share a kitchen, so there's not going to be enough kitchen space in the county. So those are all things that I know that some investors are looking at. But even then, if you get a 10-acre industrial property, you can only zone it out to so many spaces. And some are thinking of doing things as donating space for cultivators to come in, because that's a work around the state rules.
A workaround. Yeah, we're going to have to come up with workarounds. Well, my great fear, and this is kind of the direction I was going in, is that we're going to have this great separation, and this will continue to be all about cultivation up here, which will be taken over by corporations that do mech crap pot, on a massive level, and we lose our craft cultivators. And then, by the way, we lose our medicine makers as well, and our labs and our dispensaries and all of that really stays down south, and I'm a little concerned about that as well.
They are, I've talked to people who have labs and so forth, and they are not so willing to jump up here.
Why is that?
Because of the business, the employee level, of who you have access to, of housing that the county runs into, as far as you can't relocate people here because the prices of, I feel, all properties have a cannabis tax, whether they are or not, to where they feel that you're involved in the industry, because the rents are not much difference between here and Sonoma County. Yet the income level is hugely different.
Hugely.
So that's what makes it hard for those companies to relocate here and open up. Is where their employees going to live.
Right. Right.
I'd love a sketch of many brains together saying what would the ideal be. And like with some of the concepts that you're raising, that a lot of, like, you're vested in those, and so you hold them and you speak about them. But I don't necessarily know them, and definitely the board, the people that are making decisions for us, don't have any idea that what they don't know.
Right.
And it's not that they're willfully ignorant. They're
Right.
not meaning to be. They want to be informed, and they want to make good law and represent their communities well, but they're stepping into a vast territory, a huge regulation of a major economic industry that is, it's daunting. I do think, as much as I can criticize them, they're also all doing the best that they can do.
Right.
And I could imagine what it's like to be a supervisor, to get the 20 calls from the people that are threatening to not elect you anymore. You know?
And exactly.
It's got to
Well,
be totally
look at
wearing you
the
down.
combination of ignorance about the complexity of the industry with 4 decades at least of prohibition mentality
Yes.
and mainstream messages that this is really bad. This is a get high drug that's going to ruin our children's lives, and et cetera, et cetera. That is a deadly combination.
Right.
I think we're going to do a better job with the manufacturing, the other license, of what we learned in the cultivation.
Really.
I have learned a lot on how things work, and I wish we could have gone back and we were pushing to go quickly, but we really needed to slow down with the provisional license.
Yes. Agreed. Fully.
I mean, that's really, we need to get people in the program, observe how that's working, and then we adjust it, as opposed to go, okay, everybody in, and then realize, whoa, we can't deal with this.
There was
Yeah.
a lot of pressure for the
Right.
county to roll out
I
something.
was one of them.
I know.
That's
We were all
hindsight is-
pressuring them.
And,
That's true.
and you know, I think in that case, their supervisors responded well to responding to what the requests were, but it was massive for them to roll out something not well thought out. It hasn't been well thought out.
Right.
Because
And I
we
think
were
there's this Humboldt-Mendo comparison all the time. Well, what about what do they do up in Humboldt? Humboldt, everything's better in Humboldt. Everything's better in Oregon. You can grow more. You can get your permit faster. You
Not
can
so
sell it more
much.
easily.
Well, from my point of view, not better at all. I mean,
Right.
look what just happened. We're about to sacrifice medicinal cannabis for adult use. And this has happened. I just had a patient come in to my wellness center, Dragonfly Wellness Center on the coast here from Nevada, seeking counseling. He says, he has autoimmune disease. I've been always getting my tinctures at this one dispensary. And now that the recreational law is passed, I went into the dispensary. They've got two separate entrances, two separate parts of the counter, and the part for recreational was a line out the door and around the corner, and the line for medicinal was two people. He goes up to it. He says, "Well, where's my tincture?" So we're not carrying it anymore. They're carrying all the stuff that makes high buck,
Right.
and I work with Dr. Christian Lay, who has cannabis clinics throughout Oregon. I go to a lot of medicinal cannabis conferences, and Dr. Lay said that the Oregon used to have rough parity between the number of medicinal cannabis dispensaries and recreational dispensaries. The state made the dispensaries choose, and all of a sudden it was 14-1.
Right.
And I'm facing in my wellness center, I either have to get both licenses or go down the toilet because adult use will carry my medicinal, which means that in my category, I've got to spend $15,000 a year for those two permits and licenses, those two licenses. And I think this is getting really crazy because we are going to lose the value of medicinal cannabis in a heartbeat. And we're missing, and I want to give each of us the opportunity to tell people who are watching this program what you do and give your websites or your phone numbers so that they can call you for any assistance with what you're expert at. And I'll start by telling you that we are having here in this studio a medicinal cannabis class, which I offer regularly. And I travel all over California doing it, and I think this is really important that cultivators understand. It's not just about growing good flower, but really making the link between growing and making medicine and patient. We shouldn't be talking seed to sale. We should be talking seed to patient outcome. The whole thing. So we're going to be doing this on August 19th. And August 19th from 1 to 3 here in the Mendocino TV studios. We're going to have a live studio audience. We're going to be presenting a staff from Dragonfly. We'll be presenting medicines. We're presenting a PowerPoint and a short video with patient testimonies. We're going to have patients interacting with the presentation and asking questions. This is a presentation I've been doing for over 2 years now called Cannabis is Medicine, and we are changing the narrative. So I invite you all to come on August 19th and be a part of that live event. And who would like to go next in telling what you do and how to get a hold of you?
You want to go first?
CK Nursery, we are providing clones. Lots of clones, technical support with pest problems, with organic methods, which we have. It's a lot of labor, but we do it, and looking forward to the challenge. And we are at ckanursery@gmail.com is the best way to get a hold of us.
Okay.
And we provide clones throughout the year.
Wonderful, wonderful. And Chantel?
I have a consulting company called Streamline Solutions with my business partner, who's Patrick Sellers. And the best way to reach us is to call my cell phone, which I'll give right at the end. We offer consulting in a wide range of things, primarily environmental compliance, local county permit application process, building and planning process, fish and wildlife processes, water rights, regional water board, state licenses.
Great.
And also just real estate smart business decision making. Like if you own and you're thinking of getting out, for example, and you want a marketable property that you are willing to release, there's all different value assessments. So helping people talk through what do they value, what's their long-term picture.
Sure.
Long-term picture also related to water. What's their water plan? Looking at 10 or 20 years down the line, where are they getting their water from? What's sustainable? And my cell phone is 347-831-3645.
Say it again.
347-831-3645.
Great, great. Brandon, how do we get a hold of Blazing Oaks?
Well, you can look us up online, blazingoaks.com. You can message us on there. Our products are also carried by the Natural Cannabis Company, so you can always hit up one of their locations in Hopland, Santa Rosa, or Oakland. And our brand specializes in organic, sun-grown, craft cannabis. And I guess all I can say is we love doing it. We put a lot of heart and soul into it, and I think it really shows in our product.
I could tell when I was next to Brandon at the 420 market, and you have some marvelous product. Are you going to be a part of the new Appalachian system?
Yeah, we're planning on it. We've gone to quite a few of the Appalachians events. So.
And will you be going to the Emerald Exchange next week?
No, I've got too much work to do.
Too much. We're all working too hard.
Maybe
to
next
make it down
year.
there. Yeah,
There's
no,
a lot
exactly.
of events now too.
Yeah,
There
there is.
So they were talking at the Board of Supervisors about getting rid of the third-party inspectors. What do you think of that, Chantal?
I actually decided throughout the day to advocate for it.
All
I went home
right.
with the lunch break and I thought about it some more, and then I thought, well, how did it really feel? I was often on a property, so my answer is I don't think it's necessary. I think it puts another cost onto the cultivator that's not necessary. I think most TPIs or third-party inspectors are already functioning as consultants. I think, again, the program is months late.
Yeah.
And so by the time you actually get to where you could use a third-party inspection, you're probably going to be already through your harvest. The ag department and all the agencies already have to come there anyway, so there's no shield of, you're not going to not have agency staff on your property. There's
Right.
no real protection from it.
Right.
And I also found, I really appreciated Diane Curry's comment, which was that there has been a conflict of authority of who's actually giving the right information, and I thought that was the best point. That's what convinced me.
We started talking about that at the beginning of this program. Is that you got so many different messages from people.
I've got a neighbor who got some interesting advice that's probably going to disqualify him from the program.
Yeah,
Oh, wow.
I've picked up a lot of clients who have worked with somebody else, and there's different levels of information, but as a consultant, I get asked everything, maybe you guys both too, about every single part of the whole entire industry, and I've got to be really clear. This is what I know and I don't know outside of that.
Yeah.
And I can't consult on that. I can tell you how to get more information, or I can give you a quick, intuitive, maybe you should try that. But I think as many TPIs and consultants have been put in a place of where we're answering questions about things that we're not really confident about, and some people just want to take that and run with it because
Yeah.
it's better news than they heard from the other person,
Yeah.
and they make some poor decisions based upon that. So
Sure.
if you need information, I think you should go direct to the agency. Period. You know?
I think that's great advice.
Yeah, and work with your consultant and know that your consultant has a good source of information. I go direct to the agency with the questions that I have.
And I think with any business, you need to know the information yourself. Go to the agencies and work with consultants, because that way you're going to come out ahead. Because pretty much any other business, you are going to be working in it. You're going to be dealing with the regulators to get it going. And so you're less likely to make a mistake down the road. And then the consultant just helps take the burden off of you on the mundane things.
Yeah. Hey, we do more than mundane stuff.
Well, the water board, the paperwork and filing, and when it rains an inch to deal with all of those.
24 inches or
Yeah.
12 inches is 1 inch in 24 hours.
Whatever it is.
3 inches in 24 hours.
Hours.
That's what it is, yeah.
All right, last question. If you could just name one thing you wish would happen in Mendocino County that would help you and your community, just your best wish, what would it be?
Well, I think the biggest issue that would affect probably the most people is if building and planning services would back off a little bit on the commercial buildings and the ADA compliance. What they're demanding is far stricter than state law, of questionable legality in some cases, and if they don't fix that, this program will not succeed.
It sounds like they are going to. I mean,
It sounds like it, but I remain skeptical. We've been misled and, if not outright lied to, some of the times
geez.
throughout this process, that
Yeah.
until I actually see permits going forward, I'll
Right.
believe it when I see it, basically.
well, just for our viewers' information, Americans with Disability Act, the requirements that you have to have as an employer those are only in effect requirements in terms of access and toilets and ramps and all kinds of things like that. Those are in effect if you have over 15 employees, if you are open to the public more than 20 weeks per year, and This is a third example, and most of it doesn't apply. 15 employees, not open to the public, and you're operating less than 20 weeks per year. And that doesn't apply to most of our cultivators in our producer counties. So
It shouldn't.
It shouldn't. So we'll see. Let's keep an eye on that one. Okay, next wish.
I mean, on the ordinance, I would love to see there be a greater ease regarding transferability of permits, the person, not the person and the land, that type of connection, and that comes in with relocation and extinguishing.
Relocation and extinguishing, what does that mean?
That means, let's say you have a parcel and you get permitted on this year, and then you want to move it to a different parcel in the future. Maybe the compliance costs, or it's just a better parcel for working at. It's closer to town, let's say. It's not an hour out of road somewhere. Simple business ideas. You
Right.
get phone service there. It doesn't necessarily mean
That would be good.
No,
you're trying to
it's
get, yeah, it's a big thing. You're trying to run a business. If you go to the land for the day and nobody hears from you until 10 at night,
Yeah.
it makes it hard to manage both parts. Transferability is a big one, and it was touched on by some of the comments in the recent meetings, but has not been picked up. And what came back was, again, this, we can't do anything about that because of the secret document. So secret documents are big, so I can't say that that's not a valid block.
Right.
But I don't know that that was the original intent. That you couldn't, if you get permitted and you want to leave your property, that permit is extinguished forever. That's where it is now.
It makes
Versus,
makes it so you can't retire.
right, exactly.
You can't get out.
I-
He values land. It's just
Supervisor
got a ton
Kerry
of
Brown
problems.
said that they do have allowance that you can pass properties out to family members.
Right, it's just
A
very
lot of
minimal.
sham marriages happening.
Yeah, I was just thinking of that. It's like immigration.
Yeah.
Everybody gets married. Yeah.
It also doesn't address if you had a partnership and a business partnership or
Sure.
an LLC. A lot of people went into 9.31 last year, and it was like, we're three friends. We can't carry this individually. We've always all grown together. One person does the drying, and one manages the trim crew, and one person does the cultivation. So let's all get permitted together. And this year, only one of those people is going to be allowed to get the permit in the name, and the other two people they don't have an option to get a permit later on if they're associated with one parcel. So
I see.
there's other small, nuanced areas that don't quite meet how things have happened on the ground here. in the
Exactly.
county.
Need to be tweaked. I think that's a statewide problem, that
Yeah.
last one. And it's
Yeah.
certainly true with dispensaries and manufacturing
And
as well.
other businesses allow corporations.
Exactly.
That's like been
Yeah.
the shield that's worked for all the bad things that we haven't wanted to have happen, but when we want it in our favor, we're not allowed to use it. So.
No, exactly. Good points. Ron.
Citizens Advisory Board, because I think that is huge, because that would allow the gap to be bridged between those who cultivate, those who don't. They feel a forum, and I think that's going to be really key to the success of any program.
If they have real clout, they can
Right.
really do something
Right.
effectively. Yeah, that's
Exactly.
always, because there's always these paper boards.
Yeah, I feel we're getting better by having the Cannabis Compliance Unit, where people actually feel that they can call and somebody will talk to them, where they might have not wanted to call the sheriff on their neighbor. They just want to
Should you
get them to stop.
call on hold? Do you
Yeah, but-
see a flashing button there?
Nope, no flashing buttons. Oh, wait, this one?
Yes, whatever one is flashing.
Hi, you're on Cannabis News and Views.
Hi, I wanted to ask a question if possible.
Sure, go ahead. We're all ears.
Yeah, I was just listening to you guys talk about the transferability issue, and it did seem yesterday at the meeting that the county council was going to look into if it is needing to stay strict because of the CEQA impact, or maybe not. And so I really hope that the county is going to do diligence and look into that, because that is a huge, huge issue for all of us business owners, and being able to pass it on to somebody else in the future and retain the investment that we made, or receive it back, I guess I could say. But did you guys feel that they're going to look into that? Because that was the takeaway that I got.
I think they're going to punt till the Coastal Commission comes back, because they're trying to avoid reopening the CEQA. And at the Coastal Commission, that would give them another bite at CEQA.
There's a number of issues tied into this. You get your initial permit here, under this person, under that land. And there's many little side issues to it that, in general, when you bring a comment to the board, I might say, this is what I'm talking about, and this is the particular issue I want them to talk about, and they jump and they go to this other part of it and they follow that thread. That was one of my feedbacks, was in support of the advisory council or committee or whatever we call it, is that
Right.
may there be dialogue as to why
transferability cannot be shifted from what it is now. So that we, as the people that are advocating,
I don't quite get the environmental issue, because if I'm growing on my property, I can stay there until I die and grow. But if I decide to retire, how does that change the fact that that property was grown on?
right?
Yeah.
Like the environmental compliance laws
Right.
don't change.
Yeah.
Yeah, and if, but again, I always parallel with what if it was grapes, or what if it was you had a horse farm, or what if you grew corn?
Yeah,
None
imagine
of
if
those
they
things
told
matter.
all the grape owners that they couldn't sell their winery.
Right.
Like, how would that go over?
The next owner can't grow grapes there,
Yeah.
right?
Oh.
That would never fly.
No, it would never fly. Huh. Well, thank you, caller, for the question. I think it stirred up some more some more interesting problems, new angles that we need to take on. If we have no more calls, I think I'm going to call it the program. Thank you, Ron. Thank you, Chantel. Thank you, Brandon. I really appreciate your coming and being on Cannabis News and Views, and thanks for joining us.
Thank you.
Thanks for having us.
Yeah.